jump into the review of this car, please like, share, and subscribe, and thank you for watching. I hope you enjoy this video. We got something really cool today. This is one of my all-time favorite Aston Martins. This is a DBS Superleggera. And if you don't know what a DBS Superleggera is, let me explain. 2016, Aston Martin came out with the DB11. Following that, relatively quickly, they revealed this. Now, the DB11 has a 5.2 liter V12. It also has a V8 as an option, but we don't talk about that. Then they took that 5.2 liter V12 and they upped the boost, and they changed a few other components to carbon fiber, like the drive shaft, and it went from 600 some odd horsepower to 715 horsepower, and it was all the better for it. This thing is freaking nuts. Now, why do they call it a Superleggera? It's not that light. It's a 4,000 pound car, which is a little weird. But the reason they named it that is because it's 200 pounds lighter than the DB11. But these days, this Superleggera lettering doesn't actually exist anymore. This is now just called the DBS. So we've got an Aston Martin DBS. And oh my God, look at this color, okay? Like, look at these lines. Look at the carbon fiber roof. Let's zoom in on this carbon fiber roof a little bit, because it's not just the roof, which is what you commonly see in cars. It's also the entire pillar over here. So we've got quite a lot of carbon fiber throughout the car, which helps aid in the weight reduction of this vehicle over the DB11. 715 horsepower, I mentioned that, 663 pound-feet of torque. It's a lot of torque. And to aid the torque, they actually have to change the transmission on this car from the ZF 8-speed, I believe it was the 70 model, to the 95 model, because the 95 ZF 8-speed can hold tons of torque. It's the same transmission they use in the Hellcats, including the Red Eyes, etc., etc. So lots of power. But we're not here to talk about power just yet. We're going to talk about the looks of this car, because from the back to the front, it's sensational. It's one of the best looking cars on the road by far. Look at these gorgeous thin taillights. A considerable improvement, in my opinion, over the DB11. When you have this next to DB11, it just makes the DB11 look so much older for some reason, even though they share a platform. So gorgeous taillights. You've got more carbon fiber back here on this rear bumper, the diffuser, it's all carbon fiber. Unfortunately, they still have these 5-mile-per-hour little guards. What are you gonna do? You know, I wish there was a way to remove them, but I think it's directly integrated into it. Quad exhaust tips. This car sounds absolutely bananas, as I'm sure you've just heard right now, because obviously I open a lot of my reviews up with the exhaust clip, because it's the best way to start up any review, is to start the car. You've got an integrated spoiler over here as well, and that's also in carbon fiber. Now, moving around to the side of the car, 305 section tires. They're really, really wide. 21-inch wheels. They are carbon ceramic, and I mean, they just look absolutely bananas. And driving this car before we made it to this location, 305s are not enough to tame 715 horsepower. It might be just the Pirellis, the P0s, maybe Michelin Pilot Sport 4S would probably cope better with traction, but I really had to put some heat into these before they would finally grip, because first, second gear, no traction. But this car is an absolute riot. It looks like an absolute riot. I love these vents over here, or gills, whatever you want to call them. They are so freaking cool. And the front section on the front tires are 265, very, very meaty rubbers all around this car. Moving forward, this is, I think this is just one of the best looking front ends of any car for sale by far. Enormous hood hiding that V12 in there. The vents on each side letting the engine bay breathe and cool down as much as it possibly can. Massive grille. The grille is really what separates this car from the DB11. The headlights are different too. They're not long or elongated like they are on the DB11, but this giant opening looks like it's just ready to swallow up other cars in the way. And I think that's what makes this in my opinion, the best Aston Martin ever made, or at least the best looking Aston Martin ever made. And of course, you've got a clamshell hood. We can try and pop that open. Might be a bit of a process though, but you've got a clamshell hood to expose that V12. And all in all, an absolutely stunning looking car. Now, let's go take a look at the interior of the car. Before I forget, look at the way that the doors open on an Aston Martin. They angle upward to clear the curb, if there was a curb, and they call them swan wing doors because they open up like a swan. So if you haven't been living under a rock, these types of handles are the standard these days. We're gonna go inside the interior. Oddly enough, no soft close doors. So here we are in the interior of the DBS. And I've got to say, what a wonderful place. Look at all of this gorgeous detail, the stitching, beautiful leather. It feels so nice to the touch. I love this up here. I think it looks absolutely sensational. And don't ask me to sit in the back seat of this car because it's virtually impossible for anyone under 4'5" to sit back there and have any sort of comfort. Let's go over the interior and let's start with the steering wheel. So you've got drive modes that are configured on the steering wheel. You've got your suspension here, you've got your performance settings here. You can go into from GT to Sport, and the exhaust opens up, and Sport Plus, likewise, suspension, Sport, Sport Plus, GT mode being the default. Your dials are over there. You've got your speed and RPM over here. This screen is configurable. You can have it to be your trip odometer, navigation, radio, media, etc. And that functions through here, through this wheel that scrolls. All right, and the wheel also serves as a button that you press. Now, paddle shifters are column mounted, meaning they don't move with the wheel as you turn it. Next up, you've got this over here. This is your voice command, and you also have the volume knob, or I guess the volume wheel here, which thank God you have a volume wheel over here, because otherwise you'd have to do this sliding thing over here. It works maybe half of the time.
To miss your favorite Sirius XM program?
That's how you operate it. But there it is. It's so delayed. It's so delayed. It's just really, really clunky, because you know you're in here and your fingers might be a little sticky or not sticky enough. God only knows. Power button over here. This is how you access the nav, radio, media, your Bluetooth telephone. You can press this and it turns on the camera, which it didn't, because you have to be very, very deliberate with your inputs on this center console. There's your camera, 360 degree and back up, or you could switch to the 180 view in the front of the car, or go back to 360, or just back out of the menu and look at this beautiful Sirius preview screen. And I feel like now they're going to start sending me a million mails to the house. Transmission, this is how you engage park, reverse, neutral, drive, engine start stop button is right here. Thankfully, your HVAC controls are right here, and they're all buttons, because help me God, if these weren't buttons, we'd have a problem. And they all work, they all function totally fine. Directions are over here, your climate, temperature is off to the side over here. Cooled, ventilated seats, and heated seats off to the side. They're separate little buttons, or sensors, I guess. This little doohickey, this touchpad is optional on most of the Aston Martins. I believe it might be optional here too. Some people option it. I wouldn't, because it does the exact same thing as the wheel does, and it has the same buttons as the wheel does. Look, you've got the favorites button. You've got a favorites button here too. You've got the back button. You've got a back button here too. You've got a forward button. You could just do this, or you could rotate it. This is unnecessary. Now, here's a funny little thing. It took me a while to figure out. I was trying to get the steering wheel adjusted, and I couldn't figure it out because I just needed to raise it a little bit. I'm looking all around. I'm looking under. Where is the joystick? Where's the adjuster? I finally figured it out. It's behind the paddle shifter. There's 3 stalks over here. And the third one being this tiny little nub. A little nub. And that is what adjusts the steering wheel. Over here, this is your mirrors. Your door card has this gorgeous carbon fiber that goes all around. It looks so awesome. Really, really dig that a lot. Your seat adjustments are over here on this side. And then you've got a little partying trick over here. How do you open this? Well, you don't, because this does. And here you've got a pair of USBs, an SD card, and your cup holders are variable. This would be the default small cup. This folds back for a medium cup. And then if you've got a large cup, that just goes away once you insert it. And if you want to bring it back, there it goes. It comes back. And you've got this partition here just to prevent, the water from moving around. But that's how that functions. And then we close it by holding it down. And I really don't know what would happen if this were to break. There's a manual setting of some sort to open that up. But that, in a nutshell, is the interior. It's pretty cool. This is the old Mercedes-Benz tech. I mean, I remember looking at some of this probably in 2014, 15, something like that. You've also got the Bang & Olufsen over there that rises from this beautiful dashboard. And that's it for the interior. Overall, despite the limitation of the older tech here, and it's being updated as we speak for future models, and the DB12 will be that future model to start things off. But despite the limitations, this is a really, really nice place to be. It's not the techiest place in the world, but the focus is here, and I'm glad that it is, because all this other stuff is secondary. Let's take a look at the trunk. And here's the trunk. Now, I purposely left items in here just to give you an idea. That's my bag. This is not a very large trunk. It can fit a couple of carry-ons at most, groceries obviously, but large suitcases, it might be able to take one in sideways, but no more than one. That is an absolute maximum. It'd have to be a smaller suitcase at that. But just to give you an idea, I can touch the back of this storage compartment back here, the trunk, with relative ease. I'm not even stretching. So it's not the largest trunk in the world. Keep that in mind. All right, we are in the Aston Martin DBS. I'm gonna go into Sport Plus and firmness suspension settings, because for the sake of this video, oh boy. No traction. No traction. Well, I felt that. You didn't feel that if you're watching this, but the rear end, and this car's notorious for this, is squirrely. It was trying to step out a little bit over there. These cars are notoriously difficult to launch. They'll do 130 and a quarter mile at 11 and a half seconds, but they're actually capable of doing more and better. It's just they are limited by their own traction woes. These cars are extremely fast. I gotta say, this thing sounds amazing. Normally V12 and turbos, or anything in turbos, you lose a lot of sound, but this howls. And this is a stock exhaust, so Lord only knows. I mean, if there's an aftermarket for these cars, which I haven't researched, because I'd love to own one, but I haven't. Unless I own one, I won't research it. But if there's an aftermarket for this, I can only imagine how good this thing will sound with an exhaust on it. But it sounds, oh, and it pops too. We're gonna take a few corners in the Superleggera. And we're in just sport mode. We're not in Sport Plus. And that was okay. Again, it's sport mode. The steering is heavy, especially on Sport Plus. Heavy, and I like that a lot. I remember actually reading in one of the mags that that was a complaint of theirs. Heavy steering. That's bizarre to me. I completely disagree. In an age where everything's gone electric steering, and as a result, it's gotten extremely light and lost feedback, this being this firm and heavy to steer, it actually provides quite a lot of feedback. We're gonna do a rumble strip test at 40. Now we're in GT mode. We're gonna do that same test at the same speed. That was still kind of firm, surprisingly so. I gotta say, I'm surprised. The car's actually firmer than I thought it would be. It rides firmer than I thought it would. I use this road specifically because it's choppy. This is a representation of a car and how it would perform in a place like New York City or Los Angeles. And I just took that turn back there, and that was actually okay, and surprisingly so, in GT mode. And okay over here as well in GT mode. Really weird. I'm surprised that a softer suspension setting makes this car respond somehow better. It's a little bizarre to me, but yeah, no, that's rough. That was 23, and that was rough. I'm surprised. It's worth mentioning that the tire pressure was set to 50 pounds, which isn't too far off from the recommended 49 on the door jamb. But according to Aston Martin, you can configure your preferred pressures, and they recommend 40 for a more compliant ride. This time everything's dialed all the way up. Yeah, it's, you know what? It's so weird. I can't really put words how to describe this car. Okay, so through those turns, I feel the weight of the car more than I feel anything else. Once the car leans over, it doesn't feel like it wants to kill you, in other words. So it's fairly composed. As long as you're not mashing the throttle midway into a turn or right before the turn, you're not doing anything stupid, basically. It's heavy, so it's going to roll. But it handles a lot better than another GT car that I most recently did, and that was the Maserati Gran Turismo. The Gran Turismo was just too soft, almost no matter what setting I put it in. That was the Modena version. You know, there's a Trofeo as well, but I can't imagine a Trofeo being that much better. If you want a soft car, you get a DB11. If you want a performance car from Aston Martin, you get this. It's so violent, it's bizarre. I don't know how to explain this. It almost doesn't drive like an Aston Martin. I feel like I'm driving a Hellcat. I mean, maybe that's why they use a Hellcat transmission in this thing. It's just bizarre. It doesn't drive like an Aston Martin. It looks like an Aston Martin. It sounds like a V12 Aston Martin. When you put your foot down to the floor, it's like, you know what? If Aston Martin created a Dodge Viper, this is it. This was, yeah, that's what we would have, is this, the DBS Superleggera. Now, I've got my cameraman over here holding on for dear life because it's a little intimidating. Like, I'm in total control of the car. I'm not being stupid. I'm not turning DSC off or anything like that. But at the same time, I would hate to see somebody take one of these things to a Cars and Coffee, disable the traction or stability, and just, this is very capable of causing some Cars and Coffee commotion. I'll put it to you that way. I've had lesser cars do worse at my own Cars and Coffee. Okay. I would say that this is basically a Dodge Viper with a suit. Oh my God. If you're looking for the craziest Aston Martin possible, or the craziest British or GT possible, or the craziest Grand Touring car possible, Bentley's not going to give you this insane feeling. It just won't. I can't even talk straight right now because this thing is pretty crazy. The next up on the ladder would probably be a Ferrari F12 or an 812 because they're very similar driving experiences. Big V12s up in the front, rear-wheel drive. You know, the Ferrari's a little bit more balanced, but still also equally struggles for traction. But the Ferrari, again, is lighter and it has more power. So it's pretty freaking nuts to be driving one of these cars with that much power, putting your foot down into the mat and just holding on for dear life. I think the fact that we've got the 770 DBS coming out, and as the name implies, that has 770 metric horsepower, 760 American. That just tells you the insanity is about to get dialed up just a tad bit more. This is one of those Aston Martins that could back its looks up with the performance to boot. This composes itself like a GT car and a sports car. I would say this is a bit more aggressive than your standard Aston Martin. Driving over these kinds of roads here, you feel a lot more of the impacts. So I would say that if you're looking for the softest Aston Martin, this isn't the one to buy. If you're looking for the rawest Aston Martin, which I would be, this is my type of car. This is the one I would buy. That's just my personal opinion. It's not a track carver, but it can canyon carve, but it's not made for the track. All right, so the Aston Martin DBS. We know the price tags on these cars can get well into the $300,000 figure. Used ones are obviously going to be a little bit less, but is it worth the figure? Is it worth the money? I think so. I think it is. You get just the most gorgeous Aston Martin arguably ever made. You can argue some of the other ones in the DB5, for example, but I think modern Aston Martin, this is a tried and true Aston Martin. This still has an Aston Martin V12. It is not using a V12 borrowed from another manufacturer. That's a big plus to me. But this V12 sounds glorious, goes gloriously. Hold on a second. I think the price of entry here makes sense. You've got more of a bespoke experience and all this crazy, incredible leather. The interior is a beautiful place to be. It's fast as hell. It handles relatively well, especially considering that it weighs 4,000 pounds. The car seems really well balanced for what it is. The front and the rear end are pretty connected. When you kind of jiggle and toss the steering wheel around, you don't have a whole lot of float. So all in all, this car gets some pretty high remarks from me. I like it from beginning to end. I really do. And plus, it sounds absolutely incredible. So, having said that, if you like Aston Martins, if you like V12s that howl and snarl and sound like that, please like, share, and subscribe. And thank you for watching.